We now come to the backbench motion on security in the Western Balkans. Alicia Kearns.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that this House recognises the acute security situation in the Western Balkans, supports the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Kosovo and Bosnia and Herzegovina, condemns the attack by Serb nationalist militants in Banska, Kosovo on 24 September 2023, supports the authority of the Constitutional Court in Bosnia and Herzegovina, condemns Russian interference in the Balkans, notes with concern pro-Russian and pro-Serbian irredentist political rhetoric in Montenegro, and urges the government to increase its engagement with regional partners and international allies to improve the security landscape of the Western Balkans. It is a pivotal moment for the Western Balkans that approaches. A moment which will decide whether the dream of a democratic, peaceful, Euro-Atlantic integrated Balkans can be realised, or whether we will return to the nightmare of the 1990s. Without peace, there can be no progress, and with the threat of violence and embrace of hatred, insecurity is bred. Today, I hope to set out some steps the government can take to protect peace, and as we all hope, protect us from having to confront the dreadful alternative, conflict. I would, however, like, Mr. Speaker, to thank the Backbench Business Committee for agreeing to this debate. It is very much appreciated, and also welcome the ambassadors of Bosnia and Herzegovina and Kosovo to the Chamber today. I want to start, Mr. Speaker, by discussing Bosnia and Herzegovina, which, with its multi-ethnic character and constitution, acts as a linchpin for the wider region. Next year, we mark the 30th anniversary of the Dayton Agreement, which brought an end to the horrors of the Bosnian War. Now, before the war, 34% of people in Sarajevo were married to spouses of a different ethnicity. Children who studied and played together, neighbours who cooked together, but who suddenly found themselves separated by conflict, unable to understand why their worlds had fallen apart and why those they had called friends shunned and abandoned them. The tragedy of the Bosnian War is embodied in the story of the 25-year-olds Bosko Brkic and Admira Ismek, known as the Romeo and Juliet of Sarajevo. Bosko was a Bosnian Serb who was deeply in love with his girlfriend Admira, a Bosniak. Both were trapped in the siege of Sarajevo by the Bosnian Serb army and attempted to escape in 1993, hoping to continue their young lives full of hope away from the horrors of war. As they attempted to leave the city, Bosko was shot by a sniper and killed instantly. Another shot injured Admira, who in her last moments crawled to Bosko and embraced his body, eventually succumbing to her wounds while she hugged her beloved. Their final embrace, as Admira lay dying, signalled the unwavering strength of their bond and what it represented. The rejection of hatred, the rejection of ethnic division. The hopes of the young Romeo and Juliet of Sarajevo continue to be held by many people across Bosnia and Herzegovina, and it is our duty to empower them to dream of this brighter future and do all we can to limit the return of violence and more cruelty on their streets. I would very happily.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend given way, and may I thank her for bringing this debate at a crucial time. And I don't think it's any exaggeration to say that there is a tinderbox and knife edge, to mix metaphors, of this current situation. The story she's just relayed, I think, is very important, and would she agree with me that what it does illustrate is that the nationalistic leaderships who wanted to stir up this hatred were in such a minority, because the vast majority of the population of Bosnia and Herzegovina were unaware of their ethnic backgrounds. They saw themselves as Bosnians, and that was exploited by those nationalist tendencies.
My right honourable friend, unsurprisingly, is absolutely right when he says that, and that is why it's so important that at this time we see a risk of this return to the tinderbox, and that's why in this place we will attempt to safeguard the truth, because we must never forget the horrors of the Bosnian War or the siege of Sarajevo, which is still the longest in modern history and where almost 12,000 civilians were killed. Nor must we forget the genocide of Srebrenica, where 8,000 men and boys were murdered, and the 100,000 people dead and the 2 million displaced. But sadly, those who seek to break up Bosnia today use the past as a weapon, inverting it to re-traumatise victims and to glorify atrocities. Milorad Dodik, the so-called president of Republika Srpska, has consistently denied the Srebrenica genocide, despite a 2021 Bosnia-wide law denying and banning genocide denial. And as we all know, denial is a continuation of genocide. A group of countries, including Bosnia, Germany and Rwanda, are bringing a resolution at the UN General Assembly to formally recognise the 11th of July as the International Memorial for the Victims of Srebrenica genocide. The resolution is supported by Balkan countries, including Croatia, Montenegro, Albania, North Macedonia and Slovenia. Yet Serbia opposes it. Enshrining remembrance of the Srebrenica genocide and other victims of the Bosnia War in international law sends a strong message that the international community rejects historical revisionism and the weaponisation of the past. It also prevents the re-victimisation of survivors. And it sends a strong message to Milan Dodik and others, and all those who seek a return to the 1990s, that we have not forgotten and we will not forget. So I'm very grateful that the Foreign Secretary has made clear the UK will both vote for and promote the resolution. However, I would say that some are seeking to misrepresent the resolution. What it does not do is pass a collective judgment against the people of Serbia. It's about individual responsibility and ending the denial of genocide to build a better future with a common language. Denial prevents communities from coming together and building new futures. And it is the memory of past traumas that steels us in our mission today to safeguard modern-day Bosnia and Herzegovina. The Dayton Agreement, which the UK is a signatory of, established the Office of the High Representative and the Constitutional Court of Bosnia to ensure the state's viability and development. Milorad Dodik has sought to violate the treaty, passing illegal laws in Republika Srpska to reject the authority of both of those entities. He is now before a court on charges relating to those violations, and if found guilty, will be banned from holding office for 5 years and face up to 5 years in prison. Predictably, rather than face up to the consequences of his own actions, Dodik has threatened Bosnia and Herzegovina itself, stating that Republika Srpska will secede from Bosnia if he is convicted. Republika Srpska is not Dodik. Dodik is not Republika Srpska. He is wrong when he endangers all those who live within its environs. This cowardly attempt to shield himself behind state institutions would have dire consequences for all Bosnians, and so the UK must be unequivocal in our support for the Constitutional Court and its judgments. Now, Russia has a clear interest in fomenting conflict in the Balkans to distract from its renewed illegal invasion of Ukraine. Sadly, it holds a veto over the security framework of Bosnia and Herzegovina and the renewal of EUFOR. This hands it a veto consequently over the entire region, akin, some might say, to handing a match to an arson. Eventually, you will be forced to put out the fire. Therefore, I would very happily.
I'm grateful for the vulnerable friend. And actually, just to illustrate the point of where we are with Russia, Dodik gave the Order of Republika Srpska, their highest order, to Putin.
He absolutely did. Once again, my Rutland friend is absolutely right. And in fact, over the next few days, there will be a great Easter bringing together of Dodik and Vucic and others on exactly that point around a greater Serbia, which I will touch on briefly. So I asked the government to work with our allies to consider an alternative peacekeeping framework led by NATO to EUFOR. The Dayton Agreement allows NATO, it gives it permission explicitly, to legally establish a force in Bosnia for peacekeeping without time limit or UN approval. There is widespread support from the Bosnian government, and its legality under the Dayton Agreement means that neither Dodik nor Putin could block it, unlike the current arrangement with EUFOR. As a minimum, the UK should send a NATO peacekeeping force to the strategic Britchko district, which I'm sure my gallant and honourable friend will speak about shortly. Even 1 battalion of NATO troops in Britchko would make a succession militarily impossible and have a stabilising effect on all of Bosnia's politics. I would very happily.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Honourable Lady for giving way. I entirely endorse that point. A British battalion positioned in Bosnia would give a very, very strong signal. And frankly, a British battalion is probably the best battalion to send into such a peacekeeping situation.
My honourable gallant friend is absolutely right. And to that point, I know that the Foreign Secretary, in answering questions from members of the other place yesterday, said he preferred to emphasise and focus on Kosovo. However, we saw when British troops went into Kosovo recently, last September, that there was a resurgence of the actual delivery of the mandate. My right and honourable gallant friend is absolutely right that it is British troops that would make a fundamental difference. And the fact the Dayton Agreement gives us explicit permission to create a new security force means that we should be actively debating this. Finally, Mr. Speaker, the UK also should look at extending the sanctions that were levied against Dodik and other senior figures in his circle, which I was relieved to have secured a few years ago. The joint US sanctions with the UK and the US have begun to take serious effect, with Bosnian banks closing the accounts of those who have been targeted. I would also urge the government to consider sanctioning other figures in Republika Srpska who support laws designed to undermine the High Representative and the Constitutional Court, promote genocide denial and glorification, and attempt to transfer Bosnian state assets to their own personal control. Bosnia, with its multi-ethnic character and constitution, is a barometer for the entirety of the Western Balkans. And when threatening the breakup of Bosnia, Dodik said, "If anybody tries to stop us, we have friends who will defend us." I say, let us show him that Bosnia too has friends, none more steadfast than the United Kingdom. Now, Mr. Speaker, is a time for deterrence diplomacy and for a rejuvenated NATO to take the initiative and ensure Bosnia's sovereignty and security is protected. Now, whilst the situation in Bosnia is tense, Kosovo is the only country in the Western Balkans to have faced an attack on its soil since our last debate on the Western Balkans. The Banska attack carried out last September saw 30 heavily armed Serb militants murder a Kosovan police officer, Afram Djaku, before engaging in a firefight from the Banska Monetary. The amount of weaponry seized from the militants is truly extraordinary, and I've seen it myself, and I refer to my declaration of interest. Very happily.
I do thank my honourable friend for allowing me to intervene and also for securing today's important debate on security in the Western Balkans. As I witnessed for myself during a recent cross-party parliamentary delegation visit to Serbia, while there is immense potential, there are also stark challenges within the region. Does my honourable friend agree that the UK government must do its level best to help diffuse tensions between Serbia and Kosovo, help ensure that the rights of minorities on both sides of the border are protected, but also, crucially, to help promote democracy, that it must do its level best to reduce Russian influence in the region and in Serbia?
Without question, the right honourable gentleman, everyone must help diffuse the situation. Everyone must support ethnic minorities. And we should be very clear. We in this place, as I will come into later in my speech, want to be a friend to a democratic Serbia. That is what we all aspire to in the region. Going back to the Banska attack, the arsenal that these 30 militants had included 41 anti-tank rocket launchers, 66 automatic rifles, 2 automatic grenade launchers, 4 mortars, 2 armoured vehicles and over 50 kilograms of explosives. The weapon serial numbers lined up. These are not miscellaneous items, nor are they old or expired stock. Some were just a couple of years old. And I'm sure the Minister will agree with me that this level of weaponry is not typical for some provincial militia. And therefore it begs the question, who was supporting the Banska attackers and why? The answer may lie in some of the footage that was recovered from those who undertook the attack. It shows the militants training in a Serbian military base on the 20th of September, just 4 days before the attack. Likewise, some of those aforementioned serial numbers on the weaponry match up to the maintenance documents, recording the same weapons as belonging to the Serbian military. Now, I have asked countless times in this House, in writing and in private meetings, the government to release an assessment of whether the Serbian state provided material and strategic support for the Banska attack. The US has completed an attack on who is responsible and their links to the Serbian government. Our allies need to urgently release it, because truth matters, because accountability matters, because without that report the truth is denied, and without that report there is no deterrence, because impunity breeds contempt for the rule of law and order. Swift and equitable accountability for acts of aggression is crucial if we want to discourage future violence and dispel any notion of appeasement. So I will ask again, who organised the Banska attack, who provided the weaponry, and what do we assess was their intent? And I'd be grateful if the Minister could answer that when he responds. What we do know beyond doubt is the attack was led by Milan Radovic, a former Vice President of the Srpska List party. The current wave of tension in northern Kosovo exploded when Srpska List orchestrated an electoral boycott of municipal elections last May. Without the participation of Kosovan Serbs, the election returned Albanian mayors. The installation of the mayors by the Kosovan government sparked unrest, and we have all spoken about how risky that was, including me directly to the government themselves. However, what we then saw was a violent attack by on KFOR by Serbian militias, which injured 25 Italian and Hungarian troops, some of whom will never walk again. At the time, the UK, US and EU condemned Kosovo for installing the democratically elected mayors, but did not criticise Serbia for its support of the boycott and Srpska List. I wrote a joint statement signed by 74 parliamentarians from Europe, the US and Canada, almost every chair of a Foreign Affairs Committee across Europe, asking for a fairer approach to the crisis and for Kosovo not to be singled out. This statement and multiple votes and debates in the EU Parliament have shown that the international community wants to see a more even-handed approach to Kosovo and Serbia. Kosovo has since, under international pressure, facilitated a referendum in the northern municipalities to elect elections for new mayors. Srpska List again orchestrated a boycott, frustrating the democratic process and inflaming intercommunal tensions even further. The US has been clear now, however, that Kosovo has fulfilled its democratic obligations and the northern mayors are legitimate. The EU, unfortunately, has been less clear in its messaging, insisting on both-sided approach. So can the Minister confirm that the UK recognises that Kosovo has attempted to rectify the situation under its constitution and that regardless of boycott by Srpska List, the current mayors are legitimate, regardless of their ethnicity? I would also point out at this point how disappointing it is that ethnicity continues to play such an important role in the Balkans. Despite constant impediments by Russia and Serbia, Kosovo is on the verge of membership of the Council of Europe, with its application moving to the Committee of Ministers for approval this month. Membership would mark a vital milestone in Kosovo's progress in the dark days of the 1990s, and Kosovo's journey is one that we have played an important role of and we should all be proud of. However, there are some internationally who said that Kosovo should only be admitted if it creates an association of Serb municipalities. The UK should reject this firmly. Whilst I do not want another Republic of Serbs from the Western Balkans at all, an ASM will be created as part of the Belgrade-Pristina dialogue, but it cannot be rushed and it cannot be extracted through external pressure. So can the Minister confirm the Foreign Secretary will vote for Kosovo's admission to the Council of Europe this month, regardless of progress on the ASM, and encourage all allies to do so? More broadly, the UK, as a former member of the Quint, should assume a more active role in the peace talks. Our current passivity is untenable in the face of such a volatile situation. We are no longer constrained by EU consensus, and non-recognisers must be more inventive in diplomacy, so we not just find our voice, but also our backbone and stop standing on the sidelines and take action where we have duty to support our allies. Equally, the UK should be engaged in the 5 EU states that do not recognise Kosovo's sovereignty to help boost Kosovo's trajectory towards EU and NATO membership, while solidifying the inviolability of its territorial integrity. The US and the EU should also adopt a resolute posture when addressing Serbia's leadership for their role in stoking instability, aligning with Putin and increasing autocratic tendencies at home and abroad. The UK and Kosovo have a fantastic relation, and I thank the Foreign Secretary for having visited Kosovo earlier this year to demonstrate that partnership. This bond was forged during NATO's intervention in 1999 when British troops helped to avert further atrocities and put Kosovo on a path towards democracy that it has fully embraced. And our armed forces continue to play a role. After the Bansker attack, the Princess of Wales Royal Regiment quickly deployed to bolster KFOR, acting professionally to defuse the situation. Likewise, the Royal Regiment of Fusiliers deployed last year at a period of heightened tensions. The British Army is highly respected and appreciated, and so I'm sure the whole House will join me in thanking each and every soldier who served there with distinction. You made an enormous difference. I urge the Government now to work with NATO partners to ensure KFOR is given the support and taskings it needs to maintain peace and stability across Kosovo. We should consider the establishment of a new security alliance between the US, UK and other willing NATO member states with Kosovo, because this would help allay the immediate security concerns that we see. And let me give you one example of why it's needed. Last December, President Vučić stated that Serbia should simply follow the example of Azerbaijan in Nagorno-Karabakh and wait for the special geopolitical circumstances allowing it to reclaim Kosovo. This is a statement of intent and one that should not be ignored. Such comments from a head of state are unacceptable. Indeed, Vučić threatened me last year for speaking out against the smuggling of weapons into Kosovo. My warnings were decried by many, and yet what I predicted devastatingly came to pass in Banska, and I'm grateful to the Speaker and this House for the support you gave me at that time. There were also reports of electoral irregularities during the Serbian election and the busing of people in, followed by the opposition MP Nikola Sajilovic being kidnapped and brutally beaten by Serbian authoritarians. It is fitting that the Serbian opposition operates under the banner Serbia Against Violence. We in this House want to be friends to a democratic Serbia. We want elections to be free and fair for the Serbian election, but there needs to be political reform, and that begins with free and fair elections, one that I fear we are not seeing, not least when we have Xi Jinping today in Serbia encouraging Serbia to join the BRICS.
I thank my honourable friend. And during a recent cross-party parliamentary delegation visit to Albania, we witnessed for ourselves, thanks to fruitful meetings with the President, the Speaker, Ministers, MPs and others to help strengthen ties, that Albania is a close, trusted ally in terms of defence, in terms of migration. And indeed, the UK government is helping to support a great deal of work to tackle modern slavery. And we also witnessed the UK government supported youth initiatives within Kukes. But there was also considerable concern out in Albania, and also during my recent meeting with the British Albanian diaspora about the sovereignty of Kosovo. There is a great deal of concern around that, and that is something, does my honourable friend feel that that is something that the British government must work with Albania and other allies to ensure that we help protect the Kosovan sovereignty?
Yes, we must absolutely do that. Now, I had hoped to touch on Montenegro, but I will conclude, Madam Deputy Speaker. In Bosnia, we can protect the truth by voting for a UN resolution to commemorate the Srebrenica genocide. We can end Dodic's threats of succession by transitioning to a NATO-led peacekeeping mission under the provisions of the Dayton Agreement. And we can continue our successful programme of sanctions to shut down the accounts of those who threaten peace. In Kosovo, we can build on the UK's proud legacy by voting to admit Kosovo to the Council of Europe, and we can redouble our commitment to KFOR and extend its mandate by taking a more proactive approach to countering militias and criminality. We can commit to a fairer and more even-handed approach to the Belgrade-Pristina dialogue, and in Serbia we can work with international partners to promote free and fair elections and a media environment. We must be clear that we stand on the side of the people of Serbia, and that irredentor streams care little about the people of the Balkans. It is within our power to support stability and security through deterrence and being resolute in our commitment to the region. Inaction is a choice, and it is one that we cannot make. We must not step back, and we must not look away. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Jim Shannon.
Madam Chair, it's not often I get called. Thank you so much for calling me so early. I really appreciate that. I was rather caught off balance there, to be truthful.
I did just check with Mr. Speaker that it was constitutionally all right for me to do that. We were both rather surprised to find this situation. Mr. Shannon.
Madam Deputy Speaker, you, Mr. Speaker, and I very much believe in the Constitution, so we're on the same page. Thank you so much. Can I first of all commend the Honourable Lady for Rutland and Melton for leading off in today's debate. Such a detailed and helpful contribution. I have to say that also commend the Honourable Lady, if I can do that, for her leadership as chair of the committee as well, and the stance that she takes on these issues in this chamber, for not just for here, for the Balkans, but indeed for everywhere else. I know, the Honourable Lady knows I'm impressed by her contribution and what she does. The current security situation in the Western Balkans has prompted considerable international concern, and the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, with its history of engagement and long-standing partnerships in the region, also raises its voice to the challenges that threaten the Western Balkans' development into a more stable and resilient region. So it is really important, with that in mind, to be here to discuss how we can support further and do more. Now, I know that there's many more elegant speakers than I in the chamber. I look forward to all the contributions from everyone. But the situation is particularly worrying due to Russian interference that continues to destabilise and polarise that region. The Honourable Lady referred to that in her introduction. Russia considers the Western Balkans as an important region to exercise its foreign policy by inciting instability and division, ultimately aiming to assert its place as a great power in the region. Media and disinformation are some of Russia's great tools. They use it in Ukraine, they're using it all over the world. They're not the only one doing it in accomplishing just this. Russia continues to interfere in Montenegro politics, often through Serbia, where some nationalist Serbs in Montenegro are using media, specifically social networks, to promote Russia and to also promote pro-Serbian identitist political rhetoric. The gravity of the situation is so very clear. So I'm concerned that any Russian involvement in the Western Balkans only serves to undermine democracy, escalate tensions and destabilise the region. Indeed, the axis of evil, Russia, is right there, leading at the top of the pyramid, along with others across the world as well. I'm very much looking forward to the contributions by the shadow ministers and in particular by if I can say, Madam Deputy Speaker, my good friend, the Minister, who always encapsulates our thoughts and concerns in a way that encourages us. So we look forward very much later on to what the Right Honourable Gentleman will say. I spoke, and I think I might have been the Honourable Lady, by the way, who instigated the last debate in this chamber. I spoke on the Western Balkans in a debate in the House in November of 2022. I think that was the last time we did this. So I reaffirm again, Madam Deputy Speaker, my position that Putin's regime is the greatest threat to prosperity and peace in the Balkans, and I condemn any Russian interference in the region. And I ask our government, our minister and others to join me and others in this House in doing so. It's quite clear that not only is Russia a danger to peace in the Balkans, they're also a danger to peace in the world and in Europe in particular. And is it any wonder that many other countries, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Poland, Germany, and many of those who were within the Russian axis some time ago, are all fear their very survival by Russia's intent. The Russian-Ukraine crisis poses as an additional concern to security and stability in the Western Balkans as well. And while Russia's invasion of Ukraine prompted some Balkan governments to distance themselves from Moscow, Serbia has shown their commitment to their strong ties with Russia by refusing to support the EU sanctions regime amidst the ongoing conflict. Again, the axis of evil and the influence is quite clearly there. They rely on Russia for gas and oil, and Russia's support of their denial of Kosovo's independence. However, Serbia's support for the UN resolution denouncing Russian aggression against Ukraine and their refusal to recognise Russian annexation of Ukrainian territory suggests that perhaps Russia is gradually losing its stronghold on that country. I suppose only time will tell. It'd be very helpful, Minister, to have the thoughts of government and the office on that. And do they see a gradual moving away from Serbia from Russian influence? Some indications show that. Whether they're strong enough and deep enough, only time will tell. Absolutely, yeah.
I think it's a really important point that he makes, and he may not be aware that over the last few days, Alexander Vulin, the former spy chief for Serbia, who was sanctioned by the US government for his involvement in gangs and narcotics, who then moved to Republika Srpska and was made a senator for life, has just been brought back as Deputy Prime Minister. Does my honourable friend agree with me? That is gravely concerning, and it goes to exactly the point he makes about putting in place people who are sanctioned by the US but are absolutely fans of Russia, and how destabilising that can be, and how challenging it makes us, therefore, for Serbia to be a partner with us, particularly when it comes to defence and security matters.
Lady for their friendship and Honourable Lady with her tremendous knowledge and assiduous interest in this part of the world in particular shows a knowledge which I'm quite confident it cannot be ignored, and the Honourable Lady is right to underline the influence of Russia with those that they wish to see in places where they can have influence for them, and I think I would share the Honourable Lady's concerns as well. If the UK brings its global economic strengths to partner with Serbia and other Western Balkan states, there is potential for these countries to increase their resiliency against hostile foreign interference and thereby progress towards wider economic development through trade and diplomatic efforts. The UK's objectives for the Western Balkans includes overcoming divisive ethnic nationalism and conflict. The Right Honourable Gentleman, the gallant and Honourable Gentleman will speak, I hopefully, and I admire him greatly. We all in this chamber admire him greatly for his leadership when he was in the forces, his knowledge of this particular subject, his experiences there, and I know that he will, through his contribution, remind us of how awful that particular war was, but if we can do something to move forward, to progress towards wider economic development through trade and diplomatic efforts, well then let's do that, and let's try to have a positivity for the way forward. It's always you can't ignore the negatives, Madam Deputy Speaker, but it's always good to have solutions and have positivity, and have a focus and have a strategy. The UK's objectives for the Western Balkans includes overcoming the divisive ethnic national conflict. The attack by Serb nationalist militants in Kosovo last year is a prime example of the necessity for our government to pursue effectual action to achieve this objective, particularly in regard to Kosovo-Serbia relations. So maybe the Minister will at the end, in his response to our questions and suggestions, give us some thoughts how those Kosovo-Serbia relations are moving forward, and what can we do more to encourage solutions for the way forward. Considering this attack, we remain committed to supporting the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of Kosovo and oppose any action taken to undermine this. So we have shown, when I say we, I mean our government, our minister, have been incredibly strong in the policies and the way that they've moved forward. And I commend my minister and my government for the leadership that they've given. I know every one of us are greatly encouraged. The response to the attack from Kosovo and Serbia underscores ongoing tensions that only exacerbate the regional security challenges. We ask that our government joins us in condemning these attacks. This attack is an indicator of national sentiments that have increased in recent years, threatening the stability of not only the involved countries but indeed the entire region. So while this debate is specifically concentrating on security in the Western Balkans, what happens there will affect everything else in that region as well. And the Honourable Lady, in the introduction, underlined that fact. This is important that we do our best here. We recognise the need for this topic to debate in this House. Certainly the Western Balkans remain vital to the United Kingdom and European security. Albania, Montenegro, North Macedonia are our NATO partners. And we must remember those as well, because we've got partners, people who are maybe culturally different, maybe ethnically different, but morally focused upon a way of finding a solution. So I think, Madam Deputy Speaker, I see something to be encouraged by from our NATO partners, and their partnership with us is critical in maintaining stability in the wider region. The stability in the Western Balkans remains fragile, and we can't ignore that. But the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, that great nation that we are, the four regions come as one, and we fight as one as well in the British Army and in the RAF and in the Royal Navy. And I'm greatly encouraged to say that. And even my friends down to my left-hand side, they'll be encouraged by those who serve in uniform from Scotland as well. Before it's too late, we must work alongside regional and international partners to change this. The United Kingdom should redouble its efforts to address areas of needed reform in the Western Balkans, including the democracy, rule of law and defence against foreign threats. So I conclude with this, Madam Chair, and I thank you again for calling me very early in this debate. I thank the Minister. I thank him for his contribution, his leadership. I thank my government for its leadership, and I thank the Honourable Lady for bringing this forward and the achievements so far that our government and our Minister have realised. I wish that work to continue. Thus I call on them to utilise their regional and international partnerships built on mutual accountability and trust to improve the security situation of the Western Balkans. Today we add our voice to try and make those changes as well. And again, I look very much forward to the contributions from others who will equally reinforce the importance of this debate today. Madam Deputy Speaker, thank you so much.
Bob Stewart.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Some present will recall that I was once the British battalion commander under UN command in Bosnia in 1992 and 93. And since then I've given evidence in 4 war crimes trials. I've visited Bosnia frequently over the last 31 years. And what happens there and to the people that live there matters to me and matters to all those people that have served there, whether it was in the military or whether they were doing it for charity or whatever. Somehow, this country grips us, and it matters to people in our country too. I was last in Sarajevo just over 2 weeks ago, principally to attend the remembrance service for the massacre of Armici, which took place on the 16th of April 1993, and where 116 people like us, people who may well have been Muslim in faith, but they thought like us. They just had a different religion. They thought like us. They wanted to bring their children up like us. They wanted schools and things to work just like us. And that's why Bosnia matters, because we are very much akin to the people that live there. Yet, today, Bosnia remains a very fraught place, with tensions between the three main communities: Bosnian Serbs, Bosnian Croats, and Bosnian Muslims. I could say between the Christian community and the Muslim community, but I would like to point out there are other people there, like there is the Jewish community too, particularly in Sarajevo. Tensions remain just below the surface, and sometimes they break through. Bosnian society today is still like a lemonade bottle, which you pick up and you shake and you put it down and you think it's all calm. You can see through it. There's no bubbles. Take the top off. Boom! An explosion. Tensions in Bosnia remain ready to explode. These tensions are, of course, exacerbated by Russian support for Republika Srpska. Russia already treats Republika Srpska as an independent state. Recently in St. Petersburg, at a conference, Republika Srpska was treated as a sovereign entity with its own flag. And there are strong indications, maybe more than that Russian weapons are going into Republika Srpska. There's been indications of that over the last few years. With Russian encouragement, Doughty, the Republika Srpska leader, who my honourable friend has mentioned already, is blocking all moves by the Muslim Croat Federation and Republika Srpska, because they're together. These two entities are the country of Bosnia and Herzegovina, to move towards EU membership. Just last week, he stated that after the 2nd of May, and by the way, that's today, things will change. And what many people interpret that to mean is that he will push for succession, the succession of Republika Srpska away from the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina. If that were to happen, such a change would be a disaster for the Western Balkans, and is very likely to result in yet another civil war. I know our excellent ambassador in Sarajevo, Julian Riley, is really worried about this. Equally, he's terribly concerned about the number of young people, qualified young people, leaving Bosnia. Youth unemployment in Bosnia is nearly at 40%. No other country in Europe has such an appalling statistic. Bosnia is bleeding its youth. And youth are the future of any country. And the reason for that is mainly the political situation and the unstable base on which the country sits.
Will my honourable friend Mr. Werner point?
I will.
Exactly to his point, is he concerned that there is going to be an Easter weekend bringing together of Dodik and Vucic, where they plan to sign a declaration around Greater Serbia? What do you think that means and what message that sends in terms of Vucic's plans and support for tacit secession of Republika Srpska?
I thank my honourable friend, my very good and honourable friend, for saying that. I totally agree with the implication there. The real problem is that Russia is encouraging this to happen. Republika Srpska, under its leader Doughty, is pushing for it. And if that happens, and the Serbs, of course, well, they play both sides of the matter. The Serbs, if that was to happen, we could have a really appalling situation like we had in the early 1990s. We, the British, in fairness, are doing all we can to help. We're particularly helping economically. We're trying to pump prime, if you like, industry there. We're trying to support new companies setting up. Bosnia is still governed by the short-term rules, and they were meant to be short-term rules, agreed at the Dayton Peace Conference in 1996. These rules were supposed to last a couple of years at the most, and they've never been replaced. And they really need to be sorted out to make a workable system for everyone that lives in Bosnia. Everyone. Serbs, Muslims, Croats, whatever. I give way to my right honourable friend.
I'm most grateful to my right honourable friend, and may I first of all just put on record in this House just how grateful everybody is for the service he gave to the world and the traumas he had to go through and witness to try and bring that peace about. I know my right honourable friend had to deal with many areas of corruption when he was trying to do what he was doing in Bosnia. And does he believe that there has been a drift away of the big stick that has allowed the undermining of the very issues that he says needs to be addressed today?
Stewart?
Well, I thank my right honourable friend for that. Of course there has been. We had the most wonderful High Representative in Paddy Ashdown, who really did wield the big stick, and it worked. His name is still revered, and he's a friend of mine. He was a friend of mine. He remains a friend of mine, although he's gone. You're right. We need a High Representative with more power. We need the situation to be sorted out so that people don't get away with criminal acts. The mafia is still rampant. When I was in Bosnia, honourable members, I had three sides to deal with militarily, and the mafia. And the mafia were appalling. I don't want to go in today, because it's not the purpose of this debate, of how to deal with the mafia. But frankly, they're always there, and and these are the people that don't want change. Slightly lost my place now. I knew I shouldn't have written my speech. You see, corruption and cronyism remain and is supported largely by the system. Last year, when I visited Tuzla in the north of Bosnia, I met a highly qualified young lady who was desperate to go to medical school and become a doctor. She had all the qualifications. But she couldn't go because she told me she wasn't a member of this political party. But more important than that, She didn't have enough money to bribe the officials to put her on a list to go to a medical school. She was in despair and felt the only future for herself and her friends lay in leaving the country. Our country has put a lot of effort into supporting peace and stability in Bosnia. We've done so at many levels: politically, socially, economically, and quite a lot of economic work has gone on in Bosnia, and of course militarily. I really believe our efforts have been worth it. We have saved many lives. Nothing is more important for us in our lives than to save someone's life. And we've got to continue to do that. We've got to do all we can to help the Muslim, Serb, and Croat people of Bosnia. The vast majority of them, all they want is a decent life. A life that we are lucky enough to have, where their children go to school, where they can get jobs, and where they actually don't need to worry too much about law and order. We are lucky to live in this country. There, but for the grace of God, go all of us. We could have been born Bosnian. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Richard Foord.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it is a genuine honour to follow the honourable member for Beckenham, who I know is revered in this place for his knowledge of the Western Balkans, not only because he reads a lot about it, not only because he visits Bosnia a lot, but because of his rich experience from the 1990s when it was at its most bloody. I'd also like to pay tribute to the honourable member for Rutland and Melton. I say this humbly, as I think the newest member in the chamber today. But I think what a chair of a Foreign Affairs Committee ought to do is not just comment on some of the things that are going on in the world today, but also to anticipate what we might see in the future. And I'm recognising that we often come to this House to ask urgent questions about an event that might be going on in the Middle East or elsewhere that is happening right now. But actually, real statespeople look forward and think what might happen in the future and how can we head that off. Also, I'd like to say thanks to those members who paid tribute today to Lord Stunnell, the late Lord Stunnell. We were very shocked and saddened by his loss, but it also reminds us of another loss in the other place, that of Lord Ashdown. I mean, in trying to decide today whether I ought to come here to speak in this debate or go out and campaign in the local elections, I had to think, what would Lord Ashdown be more appalled by? Would he be more appalled by my absence there or here? And on balance, though it was finely balanced, I think he would have wanted somebody on the Liberal Democrat benches talking about the Western Balkans today. I'm going to concentrate my remarks on Kosovo. Not just because that is my personal experience, I spent a year there all told, but also because Kosovo is in that region, has the international border that has most recently changed. Of course, in 2008, many members of the international community, including the UK, recognised the state of Kosovo. And actually, I think you've got to one has to pay tribute where it's due, and I think it was good to see that not long after he was appointed, Lord Cameron, as Foreign Secretary, visited Pristina at the beginning of January this year when many others were sleeping off a hangover. So that was good to see. For my own personal experience, my first trip to Kosovo was working with KFOR on trying to encourage Serb returns to Kosovo. And I think this reminds us that the efforts by the international community to build peace in Kosovo were grounded on trying to establish a safe and secure multi-ethnic environment. And it's easy to forget just how much effort the international community put into trying to keep Kosovo a very diverse place. So while I was working on Serb returns, I met a lady whose husband and children had been dreadfully butchered by just hung from a tree and disemboweled in the most dreadful ways. I later went back and worked with the Kosovo Protection Corps. And this was an organisation that had grown out of the former Kosovo Liberation Army and subsequently became the Kosovo Security Force. For many, that was going to be the future army of Kosovo. And I think I mention that because I have therefore had the privilege of seeing things from two quite extreme sides in Kosovo, and I feel I'm able to see things from two very different perspectives. I should say what I do gather is there is still a very strong sense of grievance in the Kosovo Serb community, and there is no doubt about it that Moscow is playing on this sense of grievance. Moscow would love to see Belgrade acting as some sort of satellite or even a proxy. And we have pretty good reason to believe that Moscow is delighted to see the Middle East burning right now because it serves to distract from its illegal war in Ukraine. And in much the same way, we suppose that Moscow would be very pleased if the Balkans was on fire also. I will.
Aware, and I found it very interesting that when the Foreign Secretary was giving evidence to my committee back in January, and I should also thank him for his extremely kind words earlier in the debate, the Foreign Secretary actually described Serbia as a proxy of the Russian state.
I wasn't aware that the Foreign Secretary described Serbia in that way, but it sounds very, very much feasible. And I think what we should try to do instead is to bring Serbia away from the mantle of Moscow, if we can. And I appreciate this isn't entirely within our gift. But I think the one way of trying to do that is through economic means, in trying to attract Belgrade and trying to attract Serbia to our cause. And particularly, I think we've got to think in these terms about Kosovo Serbs, because we have seen the migration out of Kosovo of Kosovo Serbs. Over 10% of Kosovo Serbs have left Kosovo in the last year. And what we are in danger of is clearly these are people who are electing to leave. What we saw in 1998, 99 was people being burned out of their homes. Ethnic cleansing on the scale that thankfully we haven't seen in southern Europe since. But, these Kosovo Serbs are electing to go. I do fear that by legitimising the election that Kosovo Serbs chose to boycott, what we might then do is inflame or enrage that sense of grievance that exists for Kosovo Serbs. And to thinking about the intervention from the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, I was intrigued to see that the International Relations and Defence Committee of the other place wrote a letter to Lord Cameron earlier this year. And among the list of suggestions that they made, one of them was to promote a BBC Albanian service. This strikes me as an excellent idea, to encourage the reach of soft power within Kosovo. And I'm just reflecting, hearing remarks about Greater Serbia. I think one has to pay tribute to how the international community deliberately avoided creating a Greater Albania in the wake of the ethnic cleansing that we saw in Kosovo. Deliberately avoided the sort of any sense that the international community was seeking to annex territory. And this stands in stark contrast to what Russia has sought to do in Ukraine. It may claim that there are precedents for international borders being redrawn, It cannot point to Kosovo as any sort of precedent for that, given that this was the creation of an independent state, and what we see in Ukraine at this time is nothing but aggression, nothing but imperial annexation. I absolutely accept the premise that Russia is keen to interfere in the Western Balkans and is absolutely seeking to stoke tension between Serbia and Kosovo. And my feeling is that we must try to avoid Serbs becoming susceptible to the goading that is going on from Moscow. And so, as to the proposal from the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee for a trilateral security alliance, I think it's an interesting idea. Of course, what we saw in the wake of the invasion of Ukraine was Pristina appealing to its allies, appealing to the United States and to NATO to admit Kosovo into NATO. And in the absence of that, I suppose that deterrence by having a strong alliance with Kosovo makes a whole lot of sense. And of course, we've seen similar proposals in relation to Warsaw and Kyiv. So yes, deterrence is absolutely required. But my closing point, I think, is simply let's not afford Moscow greater opportunities to appeal to the Serbs. There are some very well-educated, well-informed Serbs who have grievance about what went on in the early noughties, in the early 2000s, and we must try to appeal both to the Kosovo Albanian community, but also to the Kosovo Serbs, and try and create that multi-ethnic state that we always sought to create. Thank you.
Oh, Sir Alex. Sorry, Sir Alec Shelbrooke.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And again, I just want to pay tribute to my honourable friend for bringing this debate at such a critical time. Madam Deputy Speaker, I was in Sarajevo. Good Lord. I was in Sarajevo in November with the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, and you have a series of lectures, a series of presentations. It was a Rothwell seminar, and you get to hear from many angles what's going on, and you come away with the conclusion that I could stand here today and make a series of statements, and I could actually make the complete opposite statements at the same time. That there is a paradox in the country, and it depends on perspectives and where does the truth lie. For example, you get the view from people who will say in one breath that there's just basically nothing has happened since 2017, that the country is in a stalemate, it's not moving forward for many of the areas that my right honourable and gallant friend for Beckenham outlined. And yet at the same time, they say that the country is moving forward, it's building more solid foundations, and is becoming a more trusted partner with international institutions. Where the truth in those statements lies is something we are exploring in this debate today. But what we do know is that corruption is still rife, and there are too many self-serving interests. In the interest of time, I'm not going to repeat some of the examples I have, because I think my right hand friend for Beckenham outlined them perfectly, especially the example of the young girl who wanted to start a medical career. And indeed, that is the reality of the situation. If you are not a member of a political party or not a member, being able to pay certain people, you can be caught in a trap. Corruption, election fraud, the state of law, these are all things that the government trying to work with the OSCE in Bosnia, but are not making the major steps forward. But there are politicians and parties who are trying to break away from the established corrupt institutions and stand. And we will watch the elections with interest over the coming years, especially in Sarajevo, as anti-corruption candidates start to stand, and that is where it moves forward, and that's where we have a responsibility to try and support those processes in the organisations that we support, for example, like the OSCE. Because my right honourable friend for Beckenham is absolutely right. The brain drain is a massive issue for Bosnia. A country cannot survive and have an economic future if it's just what remains as a retired population, and that its best interests are leaving. In 2021, 182,000 people of a population of 3.2 million left. 10 years ago, there were 300 vacancies in the military, of which 7,000 people applied for. Last year, there were 300 applications for 1,000 vacancies. That is a stark change in a decade. And the reality is that the military investment in Bosnia-Herzegovina has stalled at 1% for a decade, and that's just not enough to maintain the equipment, let alone a force. And it's that where you start to see the corrupt interests and the criminal interests being able to get a foothold again, and more fundamentally, not be worried about any consequences. But I think there is a way that we can turn this around and support Bosnia, and it is about, as the words I've used already, about the big stick, as my right honourable friend described, Paddy Ashdown using that big stick. But my right honourable friend was, I think, a little shy in the role that when he was leading in the country, of being able to do what he could to try and keep criminality under control. The blunt truth is that too many politicians are playing a very dangerous game in Bosnia, in Republika Srpska, in the surrounding area. When it looks like that their ability through democracy will threaten their position, they launch into nationalistic fervour and just carry on pushing that forward. And that is exactly what Doughty did in Republika Srpska, moving from a relatively moderate position until his position looked like it was under threat, and then becoming this far more extreme area. I think it is easy in a debate today that we discuss where we are today, where it's going forward, and we talk about that we had a war 30 years ago and what we did. I think that sanitises things just slightly. I remember, it's got to be 25 years ago, I watched the BBC drama Warriors. I watched it once. That's it, I watched it once. And I was traumatised by it. It was an excellent drama, and I was traumatised by it. I was just I will give way.
Thank you, my very good friend, for allowing me to intervene. Warriors was played based on my infantry battalion, and it demonstrated how brilliant, how well trained, how decent are our servicemen in such a situation. And I'm very proud that Warriors won the Golden Rose of Montreux for its production.
I'm more than grateful for my right honourable friend to make that point. And I think that's why within this House and within this Parliament and in the outside world, he is held in such high esteem, knowing the role he played as part of that. And I was coming on to say, the reason I've never been able to watch that again, because it was horrific. Now, I wasn't in the services, I didn't go out to Bosnia. I watched this as someone in their very early 20s, I can't remember how old I was, very early 20s, it was a drama I watched, and I found it so horrific that even though it's been repeated, even though it's absolutely excellent, I have not been able to watch it. And that, Madam Deputy Speaker, must not be forgotten. Because the Honourable Gentleman from Tiverton and Honiton's outlined some of horrific scenes that have taken place. The butchery, the savagery, the hatred that led decent people, neighbours, to carry out those acts, we have to recognise in this House and never forget. Never forget. I had the privilege of being the international chairman of the Conservative Party for a period of time, and we did a lot of work with the Westminster Foundation for Democracy, and I was very proud of the fact that during that time, and just to put on record, this is a body where Labour, Liberal, Conservative work with their sister parties helping to build democracy set up after the end of the Cold War. And I was very proud that I was able to work with the three factions of Bosnia, from the centre-right and those right-wing parties, get them around the table talking, working towards trying to develop a better future. And I used to say, I don't know whether this will have any long-term effect, but at least I can one day look my maker in the eye and say, well, I tried. I tried a very tiny part to try and make peace last, because that's what we have to do. Now, tragically, in my opinion, Republic of Srpska representatives did not turn up to the Roseroth seminar for the NATO Parliamentary Assembly in November, apart from one person who very bravely did and got a hell of a lot of pushback for doing it. They have been disengaging, and this is what I mean about the dangerous path they are treading. Because if we take the history of the Second World War, by about the 1960s, German society started to learn about the Holocaust and what had happened. And that was a very important moment in the turning of education to make sure that history can't repeat itself. But not only in Bosnia are they not talking about some of the crimes against humanity that took place during the war, but actually in some of the schools in Republic of Srpska, they're actively saying it's lies and that it didn't happen and that this is the problem we've got to separate out. And this is what we should all be highly concerned about today. And what lies behind all of this is the arm of Russia. Now, I heard that, Russia are not directly involved. They're not supplying arms. They're not doing some of the things that they've done in other parts of the world, in Syria, obviously Ukraine, areas like that. But the hand of Russia politically and disruptively is there and doesn't have to look very far. And I think that we are absolutely in this highly critical moment. And the word that was used by both of my honourable and right honourable friends who have spoken was deterrent. Yeah. And the use of a British battalion through a NATO-led operation to go to the areas and act as a deterrent is something we can do today, Madam Deputy Speaker. I don't want to see any forces having to go to try and stop the slaughter of innocent civilians. And we have that opportunity now with the Minister from the Foreign Office to take these things back. I know ministers are always restrained at the dispatch box and what they can and cannot say. But we have to send a clear message from this debate today that history does not have to repeat itself. We do not have to have programmes that I've only ever been able to watch once in my life because I found them too horrific, let alone the many members of this House who have served in the country, or ministers who are now in the other place, who were the ministers at the time, having to deal with the consequences which went on. The ongoing trauma, and I have met service personnel who served, some of them under my right honourable friend for Beckenham. I know, I have heard, I have seen the deep distress that they live with to this day as they try to protect innocent civilians. That doesn't have to happen again. We can take action this day, and we need to take action this day. That is the responsibility of the developed Western world, with its responsibility of how it manages its military, with the ethics that we work behind to ensure that those who purely out of their own power-grabbing political games are playing the nationalistic card which will lead to murdered civilians. And we are seeing this today in Ukraine because we did nothing after Crimea.
Could I...
I'll come to my bar. I will let my right honourable friend intervene.
Thank you, Madam Deputy. I thank my right honourable friend. Pleased with the Minister present. If we were to deploy a British battalion into Bosnia under the NATO headquarters, which is there, it's a very small headquarters, but a British battalion there would show that we mean real business to stop things this time. And by its presence, it would demonstrate power and hopefully not have to use force. And a British battalion, and other countries' battalions too, would help. But my goodness, Minister, this is a time when we could take a little action and it would have a huge dividend. Thank you.
I'm so grateful to my old friend. I'm bringing my comments to a close, and I think he has absolutely summarised the point I'm trying to make. I am on the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. I am chairman of the Defence Security Committee on it. I lead the UK delegation. What do we talk about more than anything else is the word deterrent.
Yeah.
And deterrent has to be better than trying to go in and stop a war. We can do it. We can do it today. The intervention from my right friend for Beckenham has absolutely summed it up. Minister, please, at the conclusion of this debate to take, if one message is taken away, it's that we can stop horror happening, which could be happening very, very soon, maybe as soon as the end of this week.
Fiona Bruce.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, for allowing me to speak today. In February, as the Prime Minister's Special Envoy for Freedom of Religion or Belief, I had the privilege of visiting Kosovo, encouraged to do so by the Foreign Secretary, Lord Cameron. I went to hold discussions on freedom of religion or belief with government ministers, civil society and faith leaders to explore the relationships between the different faith groups and gather best practice on freedom of religion or belief within Kosovo, and to have the very pleasurable experience of joining in the Kosovo government's celebrations of the 16th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence of Kosovo. Above all, the main aim of my visit was to reaffirm the UK's commitment to strengthening its relationship with Kosovo. And I couldn't have had a warmer welcome. Over 14 years of serving as a Member of Parliament, I have visited many countries. I can honestly say that I cannot recall a warmer welcome than the one I had from everyone I met in Kosovo, from the President and the Prime Minister down amongst government officials and also civil society. And indeed, that warm friendship was started in my very first meeting, even before I had left the UK, in my meeting. Yes.
Would my honourable friend go to that point? I thank my honourable friend for giving me on that point. I think she gives us an opportunity to reflect on the fact that none of us want to be stood here talking about conflict in the Balkans. Yeah. None of us want to be here talking about just security. In fact, when I was elected to this place, I said I would talk about the future with these countries. So I thank her for reflecting on the fact that these countries are full of people who want brightness and future, and they are full of hope for their countries, and they are full of joy. So I thank her for bringing that moment of reflection that was missing from our debate, because that is what we want to focus on: prosperity and future and hope and coexistence. So I thank her.
Thank the Honourable Member for that intervention. And indeed, I will reflect in a moment on the experience I had of listening. In fact, I'll reflect now of the experience I had on the National Day of listening in the Parliament of Kosovo to reflections by leader after leader there about the progress their country has made in democracy, in governments, and in other ways over the last 16 years. The pride that they have in this was heartwarming. I just give one small example of, but it's a very real one, how one of the leaders there spoke of how good it is now that when a young child sees a policeman or a man in uniform in the streets in Kosovo, they don't run away in fear.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was a privilege to be there. And I was about to say that my first encounter with someone from Kosovo was with the ambassador from Kosovo to the UK, Ilya Kapiti, who from the first moment I met him, and I'm pleased to see he's in the chamber watching today, really extended a hand of friendship, which and he helped facilitate the visit, which I know has also been enjoyed by my colleague envoy, Special Envoy Martin Vickers, MP for Cleethorpes, who is the UK trade envoy to the region, and has actually visited Kosovo 7 times now. I was very impressed to find was actually on first name terms with the Prime Minister, who greeted him as Martin. But this is the extent of the importance of the relationship which Kosovo holds with the UK, and which it was my pleasure to emphasise how much we want to reciprocate, because Kosovo is an important country in that region. It's an important bulwark of stability against malign influences, and I very much wanted to convey the message that the UK wants to work with Kosovo to strengthen stability within the region, and to ensure that we do all we can to assist that country in doing so. It was clear to me when I went that not only were all my meetings convivial and productive and exhibited a deep and enduring affection for the UK, but also that Kosovo and its people display great respect for differences in religion or beliefs, despite or perhaps because of the region's tumultuous history. So the importance of my visit was to encourage a celebration of Kosovo's religious diversity and the lessons which we can learn from their experiences to ensure the promotion of freedom of religion or belief in a multi-ethnic society. And I want to also put on my record my appreciation for Kosovo's contribution over the last 3+ years to the International Religious Freedom or Belief Alliance, a network of 43 like-minded countries determined to promote freedom of religion or belief around the world and call out its abuses, and we're a very active alliance. I'm proud to serve as Vice Chair. For 2022 and 2023 I was Chair. Our Czech Republic Ambassador Robert Rehak is now the very active Chair of the Alliance. And I want to commend the engagement of Kosovo. We have 43 countries who are members. Yes, that is true. But there are some members who are very much more active than others, and Kosovo is one of those. Kosovo has signed, committed to a number of our statements, which I think go to endorse its commitment to religious diversity, for example, on discrimination against the Baha'i community across the world, on the contribution of the Jewish faith and on combating anti-Semitism, on our more recent statement on Christians, and on a statement commemorating the International Day of Victims of Acts of Violence based on religion or belief. Those are just a few of the statements which Kosovo has signed. But I do want to also commend the individual commitment of their envoy to the alliance, my Kosovo counterpart, Arton Krasniki. Again, there are some representatives within our alliance who you can tell have a genuine and heartfelt commitment for this work in promoting freedom of religion or belief around the world, and Arton is one of those. He makes sure that wherever he can, he joins our meetings internationally. He's this year alone met with us in Washington, Geneva, and just before the end of last year in Prague. And his personal commitment to the work of our alliance demonstrates his meaningful engagement and also that of his country. And so it was with great pleasure that I met with Minister Lisa Gashi, the Deputy Foreign Minister, amongst others from the government in Kosovo. Whilst I was there, she immediately wanted to emphasise to me the importance that Kosovo holds regarding the strengthening of relationships between different faiths and of religious diversity, and wanted to hold within Kosovo, organised by the government there, a conference on freedom of religion or belief. I was delighted to hear that. These gatherings really are important, and very, very shortly after my visit, her determination was followed up with memorandum detailing proposals for a Kosovo Religious Forum this year, 2024, in which one of her staff wrote, the Kosovo Religious Freedom Forum would seek to address pressing issues surrounding religious freedom, tolerance and coexistence in the region, hosted in the Republic of Kosovo. This forum would bring together renowned religious leaders, policymakers and scholars to foster dialogue, understanding and cooperation amongst various religious communities. The conference aims to highlight the importance of religious freedom as a fundamental human right and a conduit for peace, and how countries can work together to address the challenges facing religious freedom today. And this conference would very much bring to bear the lessons learned from Kosovo's rich history of religious tolerance. And so I look forward to discussions regarding that gathering progressing between Minister Gashi and the chair of our alliance, Ambassador Rehak. I also was very pleased to meet during my visit Ardruzla Kehu, Minister of Culture and Sport, who similarly emphasised to me the importance which he held of Kosovo being an increasingly multi-ethnic state and society. I was delighted to hear that he's working hard to plan the hosting of the Mediterranean Games in Kosovo in 2030. And I was equally delighted to hear him extend his hand towards a meeting with the Bishop Tejuki of the Serbian Orthodox Church, indicating how willing he was to meet in whatever forum the minister, the bishop would like. And I was equally pleased when I met with the bishop to have a clear indication of a reciprocation of willingness in that regard. A very important moment. And I know that our ambassador, our new ambassador to Pristina, Jonathan Hargraves, is very willing to do all that he can to promote the relationship between them. So I welcome the government of Kosovo's approach towards religious freedom. It was excellent to hear very shortly after my visit that the government of Kosovo had implemented the 2016 Constitutional Court decision, which confirmed the Dakani monastery's ownership of several hectares of land, a real practical demonstration of their commitment to religious pluralism, and something which I'd sought them to look at securing whilst I was there, although I can of course claim no credit to the fact that it actually happened. We can't take for granted the continued security of the region. Yeah. We have to continue to address legacies of the past, whilst working also for a more prosperous and secure future. And I do believe that religious freedom and the work that Kosovo is determined to undertake on this have a vital role to play. I also know that our ambassador, Hargraves, is particularly determined, and he's recently returned after beginning his tenure there, to do all that he can to make progress on dialogue with Serbian representatives there, and also to help do all that he can to promote and facilitate and follow up on a joint meeting of the Independent Monitoring Committee and the dialogue which we hope will ensue there. So, Kosovo may not be a large country, but it has a very important role to play in the Balkans region. Important not only for that region, but also for the wider stability of the world as we work in an increasingly unstable world. The UK recognises the importance of our working together to secure this. And in my role as the Prime Minister's Special Envoy for Freedom of Religion or Belief, I look forward to playing my part, and I hope returning to Kosovo very soon in order to play my role in the conference, which I hope will be planned and take place later this year.
SNP spokesman Patrick Grady. Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to congratulate the Honourable Lady for Rutland and Melton on securing the incredibly valuable debate that we've had today, and congratulate her on her commitment to ensuring stability and security in the Western Balkans, not just in her time in this place, but indeed throughout her professional career. And the other incredibly valuable contributions we've heard from members all speak to their own personal expertise and experience, and I think it demonstrates why the Backbench Business Committee was right to grant time in the chamber for this very important debate. And I know that many of my own honourable friends have also worked closely with the Honourable Lady and her committee, and indeed on some of the parliamentary assemblies that were mentioned as well on these issues over the years. And that's because the security and stability of the Western Balkans affects the security and stability of the wider region, especially here in Europe. And as we've heard, the conflicts and disputes in the different countries often act as proxies or place for influence by other actors on the global stage. And sadly, much of this is not new. Anyone that's studied basic high school history will know that the roots of the First World War are often traced to the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand on the streets of Sarajevo in June 1914, just short of 100 years ago. And for all many reasons that we've discussed today, the region continues to be seen as something of a tinderbox or a powder keg, or even a shaken but unopened bottle of fizzy lemonade to this day. Much progress was made, especially with the establishment of the Dayton Accords in 1995, but those structures have not been without challenge or strain over the years, and there are increasing challenges to the status quo. Again, as we've heard throughout the debate, the increasingly assertive stance of Milorad Dodik within Republika Srpska does threaten the territorial integrity of Bosnia and Herzegovina, as the motion before us suggests, and tensions remain high between Serbia and Kosovo after cross-border violence. And the already agreement between those countries is welcome, but it has to be followed up with practical action. The roots of the instability, political instability in particular, run very deep, and that in turn has significant consequences across the region, including ubiquitous corruption, interethnic tension, strong organised crime, autocratic tendencies and limited human rights. And I think the powerful speeches about freedom of religion and belief are testament to that. And organised crime in particular remains a challenge. Drug and weapons trafficking, illegal immigration, money laundering, contraband and terrorist acts all add to the sense of instability and insecurity. And these factors both explain and sometimes compound the opportunities for external influence and the opportunity for exploitation by bad faith actors. And the Honourable Lady's motion particularly refers to Russia, and the SNP joins her condemnation of Russian attempts to amplify tensions in the region for its own gain. Putin clearly sees the Western Balkans as central to his arguments for the return of multipolarity in world affairs, in opposition to what he sees as a US-dominated unipolar order. So, for example, by blocking UN recognition of Kosovo's independence, Moscow tries to position itself as a defender of Serbian territorial integrity, and that boosts Russians' popularity among Serbs and puts pressure on Belgrade to maintain friendly relations with Moscow. And as we've heard repeatedly in the debate, Russia continues to back Bosnian Serb antagonists, both officially through Republika Srpska and informally through myriad cultural, religious, education and paramilitary groups. And at the same time, Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022 has seen the Western Balkan countries emerge essentially as a new front line in Russia's geopolitical confrontation with the West. Russia has used the media and information sphere, it's stepped up its political influence and mobilised proxy organisations to project its narratives, protect its interests and slow the region's integration into Western institutions. But that integration does provide something of a counterbalance. Progress continues to be made towards that kind of integration, particularly the prospect of accession to the European Union and perhaps for some countries eventually to NATO. And these are the institutions which have promoted peace, security and economic development among their member countries and international partners for decades since the end of the Second World War. And countries that wish to join should largely be supported and encouraged to do so, and especially at the very least starting to make progress towards the different membership criteria that would allow them to pursue membership in the future. Of course, that hasn't necessarily been the case for the UK government's attitude toward the European Union, and I think there's some irony in promoting and encouraging expansion in one direction while dealing with the consequences of Brexit in the other. I will give way.
But I think that is a deeply cynical and unfair point to make. The people of Bosnia and Kosovo want to join the EU, and therefore it is absolutely right that we support them in their ambitions. We are not saying that we think they should join them because we think it's right. We're saying if that is what they want, that is their determination, then we will support them in that journey because it is right for them. To suggest the two is deeply unfair, if I'm honest, brings political domestic politics into debate that so far has absolutely rightly focused on the Balkans and their people rather than lowering down to domestic politics. I think it's really disappointing to make that point today.
Yeah. Well, I take her point, and I'm not trying to upset much of the consensus that we've heard today, but there have been consequences. There is a message that's sent by the United Kingdom deciding that the European Union is not for it. And many of us during the debate, and we don't need to rehearse it just now, warned that that was a potential consequence of the UK's decision to leave. But I don't want to go any further on that. And I do want to say and agree with the points that have been made that there is an important role for the UK to continue to play, as her motion notes, particularly by increasing its engagement with international allies and regional partners. And indeed, her counterpart committee in the House of Lords has made a number of important recommendations in a recent letter to the Foreign Secretary, all of which the SNP would welcome being taken forward. And that includes actions by the leadership of Serbia and Kosovo to implement the Brussels and Ohrid agreements, supporting the High Representative in efforts to tackle secessionist activity by Republika Srpska, re-evaluating the possibility of rejoining Operation Alicia, the EU-led peacekeeping mission in Bosnia and Herzegovina, the provision of funding for a BBC Albanian service, the use of longer-term funding instruments to support development in the region, more activity to promote economic growth and combat corruption, and continued participation in the Quint, continuing to collaborate with EU and US partners on development, security, reform and democratisation. And I would agree with the points that the member for Elmet and Rothwell made about the value of the Westminster Foundation for Democracy in that regard, speaking as having had some experience. Yes, happy to go ahead.
I'm grateful to the honourable member. He refers to Operation Althea, which is a European Union-led operation that the UK chose to leave when the UK left the European Union. So we left in 2020. Does he think that the UK would be wise to go back into that operation as it can, as an associated state? Or does he think perhaps that there should be some sort of parallel security arrangement of the sort that was suggested by the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee?
Well, the recommendation of the House of Lords Committee was that the United Kingdom should re-evaluate the possibility of rejoining the operation. So I think that is the kind of direction in which there should be travel. It's about identifying the most important and appropriate role that the United Kingdom can play moving forward. And so these are all whatever form that takes, these are very practical and achievable steps that the government could take to demonstrate its willingness to be a good global actor. A secure and stable, peaceful and prosperous region is in the interest not just of the people who live in the countries that make up the Western Balkans, and we heard some very powerful testimony about how people want to get on with their everyday lives, but it's in the interest of all of us, Madam Deputy Speaker, who want to live in a peaceful and prosperous world. I was literally just about to conclude.
Shadow Minister Stephen Doughty.
Well, thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I want to begin by thanking the Chair of the Select Committee for securing this debate, and indeed all the Honourable and Right Honourable members for the insightful and considered contributions to today's proceedings, and particularly recognise the speeches by my Honourable and gallant friend from Beckenham and the Honourable and gallant gentleman from Tiverton and Honiton, who have very, very direct experience, obviously, of both Bosnia and Kosovo and the region more widely, but some excellent contributions from my colleague from Slough, the member member for Strangford, the member from Elmet and Rothwell, and of course the honourable member for Congleton and the colleague from the SNP. And I draw attention to my own declarations in relation to my role as a shadow minister and visits to the region. And I too welcome the presence today of the two ambassadors that we've seen from Kosovo and Bosnia. It's always a pleasure to meet and work with. And we heard some very poignant tributes also to the late Lord Ashdown and the late Lord Stunnell, which I would add my remarks to, but also pay tribute to my former colleague Tony Lloyd, who's deeply missed in this place, but also played a key role in the last Labour government in the region, and continued to take a keen interest in the security and stability of the Western Balkans. Madam Deputy Speaker, we're all too aware of the crises that we currently see in the Middle East, in Africa, and of course the terrible war in Ukraine. But we must not lose sight of the strategic importance of other key regions, and indeed our historic diplomatic, military and other obligations to them. And of course the Western Balkans is one such region. And I'm pleased that despite the many political differences in this place, the debate today I think has underscored that there is cross-party support and concern for maintaining the values of democracy, security and stability in the region, a commitment to the prevention of conflict and atrocities and the defence of fundamental human rights. And as a Parliament and indeed as a country, we must recognise the continuing tensions across the region and their capacity, as has been warned many times today, to destabilise the countries and peoples in the region, with potentially dire consequences not only for the peoples of the region but also for European security more widely. And it's been referenced many times of the destabilising role that Russia is playing, and I think that's been quite rightly recognised today. I'll happily give way.
I'm most grateful to the honourable gentleman, and there was a point just made by the honourable gentleman of the SNP. Sadly, he was just about to sit down, but the honourable gentleman is absolutely right when he talks about the consequences which come for the rest of Europe. Doughty and Republika Srpska is not just talking about Republika Srpska, he's also talking about a greater Republika Srpska. Parts of Serbia, parts of Kosovo, parts of Montenegro, which is a NATO ally. And with Russia's hand to cause disruption, in many similar ways that history has already happened, we could be easily, all of us, dragged into a war if we allow this nationalistic fervour to take the route that he is preaching.
Well, he's absolutely right to highlight some, I think, the deeply irresponsible rhetoric that we've heard in recent weeks, but over longer periods. And we all know the risks that pose from the historical conflicts that we've seen in the region. And I would add, Madam Deputy Speaker, that of course the concerns raised today are shared indeed by NATO, by our colleagues in the EU, the United States and others. And I want to emphasise that the region is a priority for me and our Shadow Foreign Affairs team, and would be for any future Labour government. And indeed, over the past 2 years, I've personally met diplomatic, parliamentary and governmental representatives from every country in the region, as well as our excellent envoy, Lord Peach. And I pay tribute to our excellent ambassadors in the region and our Foreign Commonwealth Development Office teams for all the work that they do. Just this last week, I've been meeting with colleagues from Albania, the Bosnian ambassador, delegations from Kosovo and many of the other countries across the region, as indeed other envoys across the region. It's very crucial, it's been referenced today, that we work together with key allies and partners. The horrors of the 1990s are, of course, ingrained in the minds of many people across this country and across the House, including indeed armed forces personnel from my own family. And I have powerful memories of visits myself, particularly in Bosnia with the honourable and gallant gentleman, but also in Kosovo. And we all know the terrible consequences that can happen if ethnic hatreds are allowed to devolve into identity-based violence. And I think of the young man who, my own age, I met, Nedzad Avdic, one of the survivors of Srebrenica, and the horrors that he went through. I was a young lad enjoying a beach holiday as a teenager in South Wales, while he was enduring his family and others being slaughtered around him. And those examples will never leave my mind. So no dynamic underscores more the need for our collective engagement than the enduring challenges in the relationship between Kosovo and Serbia. We remain on this side strong supporters as the government of Kosovo's independence and sovereignty and security. And of course, earlier this month, it was disappointing that we saw many in northern Kosovo boycott the local referendum that took place. Only, I think, 100 out of 46,000 registered voters cast ballots in the predominantly Serb municipalities. parties, and that comes despite the government in Pristina agreeing to annul last year's local elections and hold new ones. I have had the pleasure of visiting Kosovo, as I mentioned, and meeting members of all communities, and it's very clear that there can be a very positive future forward for Kosovo, involving Kosovan Albanians and indeed Serbs and indeed other minorities. And it was pleasing to see a Kosovan delegation recently here visiting Northern Ireland and actually learning from our examples there of different communities coming together and living in peace despite differences, but finding ways forward and finding political solutions. And I think we would all want to support those efforts. We are proud, of course, of our historic actions in relation to Kosovo, but it's crucial we play our part now, and I want to particularly pay tribute to the UK forces who've come in alongside the existing UK forces in KFOR to reinforce, particularly after the incidents we saw referred to in Bankska and elsewhere. And it's crucial that those responsible for destabilising are held to account and brought to justice. And we must work closely with all colleagues in ensuring those tensions don't develop in any further devastating direction. It's also crucial that we support the decisions of people in the region, and of course note the decision of the PACE to approve its recommendation for Kosovo to become its 47th member state. It's absolutely crucial that any tensions around this are not escalated. Kosovans must be free to determine their own paths, and welcome the UK government's recent statements on this matter. I hope the Minister can outline what recent discussions he's had with EU counterparts, United States and others about the ongoing tensions, how we can work to prevent further destabilisation, how we can ensure that contribution to KFOR continues, and also where he sees the diplomatic dialogue going forward to normalise relations between Belgrade and Pristina. Reference has been made to the internal dynamics, of course, within Serbia. I've heard from many figures across Serbian political spectrum. It's very, very important that we support democracy, inclusion and stability within Serbia, and that people are allowed to take part in political processes there. Also recognise that there are tensions in a number of the other countries, and we don't have the time to go into today, Madam Deputy Speaker, but the situations in Montenegro that have been particularly fragile over recent years. Montenegro, of course, a key NATO ally, and of course in North Macedonia as well, which I had the pleasure of visiting Skopje and meeting with political figures across the spectrum. Again, another key NATO ally. What are we doing to ensure that those countries continue on a path of democracy, stability and the rule of law? We've heard extensive discussions today about the situation in Bosnia, and as I said, I met with the ambassador recently. We all have joined today in raising concerns about the rhetoric of Milorad Dodik and others. We have joined with the government before in supporting sanctions against those who seek to undermine Dayton, but it's very, very clear that when we come to issues of recognition of the past atrocities and otherwise, that this is about identifying those responsible for those, not against a people or a whole community, as was rightly pointed out by the chair of the committee. We've also seen concerning steps forward about a so-called Foreign Agents Act in Republika Srpska, mirroring developments elsewhere, and again removing the ability of those to hold governments to account, of human rights organisations, of democratic transparency is a hugely worrying step forward, and I would appreciate the Minister's comments on that. Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, it's been a pleasure also to meet with colleagues from Albania in recent weeks. Again, another key NATO partner. It's good to see increased cooperation with Albania in relation to migration matters, in relation to trade. The British Council also playing a crucial role there, and particularly looking at the future for young Albanians, as rightly raised by my colleague from Slough. And I hope the Minister could say a little bit about the positive steps that are being taken forward in our bilateral relationships with Albania. But in conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, the United Kingdom, of course, has crucially important relationships across the region. We must strive to play a positive and engaged role through our ambassadorial teams and international fora. We've got some crucial elections taking place in the region over coming weeks. We've got to make sure that these matters and security and stability in the Western Balkans continue to remain a priority, particularly given the warnings in relation to Kosovo and Bosnia. And I hope you can say what steps will be taken at the upcoming European Political Community Summit, which we'll be hosting in July, to not only bring together parties, but to promote peace and stability in this crucial region.
Minister David Rutley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Rutland and Melton, for securing this timely and very important debate. And I pay tribute to her work as Chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, along with her tireless, very active efforts to secure a more stable, peaceful and prosperous future for the people of Western Balkans. The Minister for Europe, my honourable friend, the member for Wealden, would have obviously been delighted to take part in this debate. She's currently travelling on ministerial duty, so it's my pleasure to respond on behalf of the government. And I'm grateful for the many contributions, I mean very thoughtful contributions, very emotive contributions, helping us to understand the significance of this region. The people of the Western Balkans clearly deserve the opportunity to live in stable, inclusive and democratic societies where they can heal the scars left by conflict and grasp every opportunity to thrive and prosper. This is what we're striving towards, to see all 6 countries playing their full part in the Euro-Atlantic family of nations, with the opportunities and benefits that brings. Sadly, as we've heard today, we're a long way from the peaceful and stable Balkans we all wish to see. Contributions from my honourable friend, the member for Rutland and Melton, Glasgow North and Cardiff South and Penarth have highlighted the context we're working here within, and the democracy is fragile at best. Political elites are ramping up ethno-nationalist tensions for their own benefit, and Russia, as has been highlighted across the House, Russia is fanning the flames of division to distract attention from Ukraine and move the region away from the West. And it's good to see the House unite in calling out that behaviour. We must, of course, avoid a return to conflict in the Western Balkans at all costs. We're painfully aware of the serious consequences that would have in the region and obviously beyond. Meanwhile, it's clear that political weakness and instability in the Western Balkans is threatening our own, the UK's security. Endemic corruption is fueling illegal migration and allowing serious organised crime groups to thrive and operate in this country, including in the drugs trade. With this in mind, we're taking a multifaceted approach. Firstly, addressing the drivers of instability, whether that be Doughty's push for secession or heightened tensions between Serbia and Kosovo, but also focusing on the underlying factors enabling this. We're engaged with all 6 countries, taking a cross-government approach underpinned by our programmes in the region. Last year, we spent over £47 million on supporting security and defence, preventing conflict and promoting media freedom, along with the efforts to tackle corruption and organised crime, and of course, empower women and girls. Given the growing instability with all the risk it poses, we're prioritising the Western Balkans in our diplomatic engagement. The fact that one of the Foreign Secretary's first visits was to Kosovo, has been highlighted by others in this chamber today in January, demonstrates the importance we place on our ties with the region. Indeed, the Prime Minister's Special Envoy to the Western Balkans, Lord Peach, visited the region 12 times last year and made a further 16 trips to other interested countries, as well as regular engagement with international organisations such as NATO and also the EU. Moving to the situation in Serbia, the UK has long worked with Serbia on shared priorities and will continue to do so, making clear where we disagree, and we will judge individuals by their actions. It's not for us to comment on the appointment of individual ministers, but it clearly raises questions to see a US-sanctioned individual in the government. Let me turn to some very specific questions and issues that were highlighted today about the relationship between Kosovo and Serbia, where we've seen increasing violence, including the terrible attack in Banska last September, which was highlighted very clearly by the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee. In every meeting, every call, every letter we exchange with Serbian and Kosovan leaders, we urge them to avoid inflammatory rhetoric and escalation and engage constructively in the dialogue. Only by genuine dialogue and mutual goodwill can we normalise relations between Kosovo and Serbia and start to build the brighter future that their citizens deserve. We also continue to make clear to Serbian authorities that they must cooperate fully with efforts to hold to account those responsible for the Banska attack, take steps to tackle cross-border arms smuggling, and encourage Kosovo Serbs to return to institutions and serve the communities they represent. It's also clear with Kosovo government on the need to have and ensure that minority communities can play a full and equal role in the country's future. We're disappointed that the mayoral recall referendum on Sunday, the 21st of April, which was arranged specifically to return to representational governance, was boycotted by Kosovo Serbs. It's important that a route is found back to representational governance in these municipalities. And I can confirm to colleagues, I think they already know, that the UK will vote for Kosovo to join the Council of Europe. Talk has also been raised about the investigations into Banska. The Kosovan police and prosecutors are the appropriate authorities for investigating the attack, and it's right that we wait for that investigation to conclude. We've previously sanctioned Rajovic and also Kosovan Serb criminal, the Kosovan criminal charged with organising the attack, and we've urged Serbia to hold perpetrators to account and address the ongoing problem of cross-border arms smuggling. Just moving on to the situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina, the Honourable Member for Tiverton and Honiton talked rightly, as did others, about the role of Lord Ashdown, but I think we all recognise here the important role that the Right Honourable and gallant Member for Beckenham performed in Bosnia and Herzegovina. He reminded us that that country matters, and he highlighted the tensions there as well. I'll never forget visiting Sarajevo with my family. You can't help but be moved by being in that great city and meeting with the people and being reminded of the horrors of the past. We're facing, and we recognise that we're facing the threat of Republika Srpska seceding from Bosnia and Herzegovina. We've condemned Dodic's secessionist actions and underlined our steadfast support for the High Representative. We're working with our international partners to deter further efforts at destabilisation and to support the reforms needed to progress towards EU accession. I will.
I'm grateful to the Minister. On the point of deterrence, we heard from the Right Honourable Member for Beckenham and the Chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee that what might serve to deter better would be putting in perhaps a British battalion or a British battle group into Bosnia at this time. Does the Minister agree with that suggestion? And would that be feasible with an army, a regular army of 73,000?
At the moment, we have no plans to contribute to EUFOR or to rejoin at this time, but we recognise that it's vital for Bosnia and Herzegovina's security, and we work hard to support it. NATO supports this force under the Berlin Plus arrangements, and the UK continues to be a strong supporter of Bosnia and Herzegovina's armed forces. In fact, that was underlined by the deployment of the 1st Battalion Royal Anglian Regiment to train alongside the Bosnia-Herzegovinian armed forces personnel in October and November 2023 last year. Just moving back to sanctions, I think that's an important aspect of the situation in Bosnia as well. In January, we sanctioned a Bosnian media company for undermining the country's constitution. This builds on the sanctioning in 2022 of Doughty and then the then President of Republika Srpska, Zelja Cijanovic, and we constantly keep our approach to sanctions under review. We'll consider targeting others who are continuing to seek to undermine the situation in Bosnia-Herzegovina.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend. I'm listening carefully to what he's saying. I think we must be very careful to not allow recent history to repeat itself. President Obama made it crystal clear that if chemical weapons were dropped in Syria, it was a red line that wouldn't be tolerated. And then nothing happened. And then Russia walked into Crimea, and nothing happened. and now we have a war in Ukraine. It's all very well saying that we'll work through the diplomatic areas, that we'll work through sanctions, but what I'm really interested in is saving lives. And I urge my honourable friend to go back to the Foreign Office. I don't expect a response now. Go back to the Foreign Office and say that this debate has highlighted that normal diplomatic routes are not going to be enough. We need a big stick.
I know my right honourable friend's views well. He communicates them with alacrity and clarity, and of course we'll reflect on those remarks. I just want to underline we're taking a comprehensive approach here to a very serious problem, and it's good to see support across the House. And I've heard the point, and the government's heard the points to be made. I'm getting the eagle eye of Madam Deputy Speaker, so I'll accelerate through the last parts here. I'd just like to highlight, in response to the opposition spokesperson, that in Northern Macedonia, we'll continue to support Northern Macedonia's Euro-Atlantic path. And in Montenegro, we welcome the progress that's being made under Prime Minister Spajic, which is geared towards boosting economic growth, bolstering the rule of law reforms and building closer ties with its European neighbours. And in conclusion, before I get to the conclusion, I'd also just like to talk about a very important contribution by my honourable friend, the Foord envoy for the Prime Minister, in the work that she's been doing in Kosovo. Really important work, and it was good to see how her work is helping to celebrate, and indeed the work of civil society and religions in Kosovo, is celebrating the diversity of religion or belief. And it's important that Kosovo are taking an active participation in the wider Foord agenda, because I think we can learn from their experience, putting it frankly. So, to conclude, Madam Deputy Speaker, the UK is determined to bring about a more stable, secure and prosperous future for the Western Balkans for the sake of all our people. This includes supporting the governments of the region to build open, inclusive societies with strong democratic institutions, helping them to tackle the criminality and corruption that drives illegal migration and blights economic growth, and ensuring that women and minority communities are empowered to play a vital role in society. Let me congratulate once again my honourable friend for securing this debate and for her huge contribution in this debate and the action that's being taken around it. It's important to focus on this important region and on the steps that we need to take to help continue to underpin the stability of the people that live there. Thank you.
Thank you. Alicia Kearns.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank you for convening this debate and for the Minister for his response. The future of the Balkans must be one of peaceful coexistence. It's what their people desperately want, and it's what the world needs. We also need to end the re-traumatisation that's taking place to the falsification of history and ensure that when we see crises, we step up and we act. Because foreign policy is not just about reacting. Too many people think it is. It is about shaping, it is about mitigating, it is about supporting, and we have a duty to act, not least in the Balkans. I finish by saying that in the face of denial rages a truth undeniable. Eyes that saw too much and eyes that saw nothing. We must see in this place, we must speak in this place, and we must be sure as a country that we act. And I thank every honourable member for taking the time to contribute to this important debate, not least that local elections would of course have called on all of you to be elsewhere. So I really appreciate that commitment to this cause. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
The question is, as on the order paper, as many as their opinions say aye. Aye. On the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Thank you. That concludes the first of today's debates, and we will now move to the second backbench business debate on pension schemes. I am pausing very briefly to allow a change of dramatis personae.